Hello, everyone. This is Chris McCleary from the National Dream Center, where we are healing the collective psyche one mind at a time. I'm starting a new video series, and these are things we're going to be looking at for specific topics inside of the clinical setting. And today is just going to be anxiety. Anxiety. Everyone seems to have a lot of it, and nobody wants any of it, despite the literature says that we probably should have a little bit of anxiety. It's normal, it's a human thing to have some stress once in a while. And not only that, it looks like for test taking and sports taking, just general performance altogether, a little bit of anxiety goes a long way in that performance, even with relationships and acting out. In other words, you become a better citizen with a little bit of anxiety. It's when the anxiety becomes debilitating and you can't live with that, it becomes disastrous for, well, relationships, your own health, the immune system gets compromised, you become sick more, you might even have worse performance at work. So what we want to do is reduce the anxiety. We don't want to get rid of it. But in order to explain how we're going to reduce this, we need to divide this discussion up into two types of anxiety. The first one is transient anxiety. So if you're out there in your car and the car won't start and you're late for work and you don't know what the boss is going to say, your anxiety probably shoots through the roof. And maybe your hands start to shake, your heart starts to pound really hard, and maybe racing thoughts. And in this state, it's very bad because outcomes are different in this state. You tend to be more survival oriented, and you tend to be a little bit more impulsive, and you don't think through things quite as well. And that's real phenomenon, real physiological phenomenon, because the blood in the prefrontal cortex is not really engaged. We're talking about more of the hippocampus at this point, and you are going to be a little bit more impulsive. It's about kind of fight or flight at that point. So there's things that we can do for transient, for transient anxieties. You could simply just wait until the situation's over. So for example, in this case, you're at work, boss doesn't say anything, everything's fine. So anxiety naturally comes back down. Now, when you're up at this pinnacle, though, it is beneficial to at least address the anxiety that you have, acknowledge it, and do something about it so that you can bring your anxiety down into more of maybe a 4 out of 10, 3 to 4 out of 10. That's on kind of a moderate level, where the prefrontal cortex, the judgment center up here in the front part of the brain, starts to open up again. It gets blood, and you're able to think through logically, what should I be doing next? Instead of being impulsive and back in survival mode. So we'll teach you those things when your transient anxieties come up on what to do so that you can purposefully bring it down almost immediately so that you're in that sweet spot of anxiety. Now, the other type of anxiety is when you are experiencing a spike of anxiety, and let's say that you do these behavioral techniques, such as maybe breathing, what might be one of them, you're doing everything right, you're relaxing, but it seems to level off. Let's say it levels off at 5, which is not uncommon. Levels off and you can't get down below 5, no matter what you do. Let's say that maybe you're at a stressful job, and let's say you're ready for a vacation. So you take a vacation, you notice that even though there's no stressors there on your vacation, you're sitting by the pool and you're still at a 5. That's called your baseline anxiety. And baseline anxieties are all sorts of reasons. It's a chemistry in the body, as your body's habituated to stress. And this is where it becomes disastrous for your body. Health, relationships, work performance, etc. They've shown repeatedly that you become less creative, you're less fulfilled. All sorts of problems start to ensue from there. So we want to bring down the baseline anxiety, but this is going to be a longer term project because we're talking about there's a long period of time where you inched up this baseline anxiety. A quick one, easy one is nicotine. addiction, or even just cigarette smoking, even if you're not an addict, tends to bring up your baseline anxiety. And the most common numbers that I've seen for cigarette smokers who are in treatment, they may not be in for cigarette smoking, but the anxiety associated with nicotine dependence or regular smoking is around 5 to 7 out of 10. So imagine if you have a 5 to 7 baseline anxiety, means you can't ever get below a 5, no matter what you do, no matter what behaviors you're enacting because of that baseline. So for this one, we're looking at lifestyle choices, and we're looking at cognitive restructuring. These are things that are going to take a little bit longer to bring that baseline anxiety down. But the goal being, since the baseline is the more long-term chronic stressors, we're going to hopefully bring that down to 0 or closer to 0, so that you have the capability, when you do have a spike of anxiety, to manage that to where the situation is over and the useful life of the anxiety is over, and now we're going to bring it down to 0. So you can have a pure human experience where you're not riddled with anxiety for the rest of your life, like a lot of firstborns are. Oh yes, birth order does matter. In fact, there's a higher propensity for firstborns. We're talking about if you have multiple siblings, for firstborns, just for some reason, coincidence, to have higher anxiety. And we know this because they have more frequency, higher frequency or higher potential, higher probability of having later in life a stress-related chronic illness. Interesting. We can bring those people's baselines down as well. Remember, anxiety in general is not necessarily a bad thing. Up here in transients is bad because it prevents you from performing. And down here in the transient is good if you're faced with a need to perform. But baselines, any sort of baseline, you'd be better off to bring the baseline down to 0, so that you can just worry about the transients and manage those transients in a good way, so that you can use the anxiety to your advantage. Okay? Now, one last thing we need to talk about is the medications associated with anxiety. And for the most common class is called the benzodiazepines, or pretty much your anti-anxiety medications. They're particularly dangerous because the literature says that after about the clinical useful life of about 6 months, if you're taking them for longer than that, the body not only gets tolerant of it, meaning that you need more of the drug in order to get the same effect, but you're also poised to have withdrawal effects. So withdrawal is very much associated with baseline anxieties. So if you've seen someone who's been on anti-anxiety medications for over 3 to 6 months, then when they start coming off, you're going to see immediate baseline anxiety increases. And some of them, for the severe addicted benzodiazepine users, we're talking about a baseline of maybe 8 or 9. It's really incredible, maybe even 10. Panic attacks immediately went from withdrawal. If you're one of those, then you need to seek professional help immediately, particularly with a psychiatrist or a medical doctor who's licensed to provide help with medications. Otherwise, I would love to help you with the behavioral concerns and the cognitive concerns, and learn how to bring down your transient anxieties, learn how to bring down your baseline anxiety for good, and only worry about how to manage them and put the anxiety for use in your life. I am a licensed counselor in Arkansas. I can provide therapy anywhere inside of Arkansas through the internet. So, but if you're wanting a face-to-face session, my office is in Lowell, Arkansas. And I'm also an advanced alcohol and drug counselor. So I can provide assessments, I can do treatment as well. And I'd be happy to do that for you. If you're interested in more information, that first link down there would be a good thing to look at. But if you're ready to apply for services, which I operate on a sliding scale, click on that second link and it'll take you straight to a form to fill out. Hope to hear from you, and have a wonderful day until next time.